Have you ever met a change agent? Do you even know who or what they do? I didn't until I met today's guest, Sue Burden. Sue is a catalyst for inspiring others to keep moving, stay curious, and embrace aging. She's a true example of leaning into new challenges for body and mind. I'm excited to introduce you to her, so let's get started. Welcome to the Youthful Older Yogi podcast. I'm MJ Waddell, your yogi host and founder of Share Yoga. I've been practicing, teaching, and loving yoga for over 25 years. I'm an advocate of movement, creativity, and staying healthy in mind and body after 50. And so are my guests. It's never too late to start, and there's a lot of healthy years ahead. So let's start now. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Youthful Older Yogi. I'm MJ Waddell, the host and creator of Share Yoga. I'm so happy you're with us today. I've met a new friend last month. Her name is Sue Burden, and we met last month in May at an aqua yoga certification here in Florida. And after just meeting her briefly and hearing her stories and all her experiences, I thought she would be a great guest for the podcast. So I'm going to learn as much about her as you are because we're newer friends. And she is a lifestyle coach, a yoga instructor, and she calls herself a change agent, which I thought is the best way to label yourself. So, and that's what I love about doing this podcast is that I get to meet new people and bring them on, and they get to share their wisdom and stories with you, my audience. So hello, Sue, and thank you so much for being on the Youthful Older Yogi.
Thank you. I appreciate you asking me. I'm honored.
Good. Well, I'm so glad I met you, and I'm just going to dive right in. So I want you to tell our listeners how you first found your way into a yoga room or a yoga class.
Well, I have to thank a good friend named Anne who introduced it to me because my middle name was Stress. I was a bowl full of stress, and work created a lot of stress, having a young family, relocating a couple of different times in my early career and then onward even later into my career. I continued to move and evolve and become a change agent for my family and my lifestyle and for my job. So my friend recognized that and she said, I've started to do yoga at the Y and I really think you'd like it. And I thought, what the heck? I don't have anything to lose because right now I need something to help me relax. And so I instantly fell in love with the yoga instructor. She was very intuitive to what all of her students needed and helped us to learn yoga because most of us were new to it. And at that time, I was not I wasn't on the aging track. I was in it was 30 years ago. So I was in the middle of my lifespan up till now. And I was, exercising, but I wasn't really connecting the dots of my mind and my body and how I needed to relax my mind and breathe into things. So it was really thanks to a girlfriend that recognized I needed something and we found it.
And I love that you said that it was the first time you connected mind and body. We talk about the mind-body connection so often in yoga, and some people, not all, question that, like, what does that mean? And really, we're just a complete human. So you can't do anything without your mind, and you can't do anything without your body. So when you kind of bring the two together, they can be, as you said, it's a really nice agent for change. And it just helps you in so many other things outside of the yoga class. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah. And you shared with me that you had some weight challenges, and I'm interested to learn about what that road was like for you going into a yoga class, if you wouldn't mind sharing with our listeners.
Absolutely. I mean, I yo-yoed my weight all throughout my life. Mm-hmm. My sisters were thin. I was never the smallest person in the room in our family, and it continued through my life. I was always battling what I put in my mouth, and stress would usually increase poor decisions. So when I was in a very stressful situation, work-wise or traveling internationally, I would typically not eat the right things for my body to fuel it. And so um, when I discovered yoga, I was nervous about being able to do a forward fold with my stomach, not being able to reach my toes. Um, just my balance would be off in being able to do things because I had a gut and I was bigger busted. I had solid legs for sure because I did some cycling and things like that, but I did not feel good about my body for a long time. So, putting on a pair of yoga pants and getting in a classroom with other people that I imagined would be thin and willowy to do something like yoga, I expected that I would be judged, just like I was judged in sports all of my life growing up. My sisters were very athletic, and people would say, "Why aren't you like your sisters?" I wasn't athletic. I hadn't found my sport, so to speak, the thing that I could really do well and be comfortable in my own skin. And I quickly found that on the yoga mat, that rectangle, I was all by myself. I wasn't being judged by other people. And if I did feel judged, I didn't let it bother me because I wasn't in tune to what anybody else was doing around me, other than to make sure that I was following what the instructor said. I really enjoyed being in a class where the instructor was doing the moves because I hadn't watched yoga online because at the time it wasn't Adrian wasn't a big phenom on YouTube like she is now, which she's actually brought yoga to a lot of people that were afraid to leave their home and leave the safety of not being judged by others. But I strongly encourage people in my own classes when I teach to not pay attention to what anybody else is doing. You do what you can do, and stay focused on yourself and your own rectangle. And so I found that yoga allowed me the freedom to explore and feel better about my body. And all of a sudden, after I did it, the first 2 or 3 times I wasn't sure about yoga at all. And I was encouraged to give it a college try longer than a couple of times. And I did. And then as I began to do it, my gosh, I felt much more empowered with my body. And when I took a lapse from yoga for whatever reason, life's curves, I'd come back and I'd be like, I'm right at the starting gate again. I'm back, not being able to get in a fold like I was or feel comfortable in child's pose or things like that. And I probably gained a few pounds at that point, but then I got right back into it. If I stuck with it past that, 2 or 3 times, I definitely would feel the power of my mind being freed from feeling like I can't do things just because of my weight.
I love that you shared that because, of course, you're not alone, especially in the judgment. And I've never been in a bigger body. I am a little bigger and thicker now because I'm postmenopausal, but I was always judged because I was a dancer and on stage. So being judged was part of your career, you know,
Mhm.
how you get the job. So, and when I went to my first yoga class, that's exactly what I felt. No one is judging me. For the first time, I felt so free and could do and experience and feel my body without anybody watching me. And
Mhm.
so it doesn't matter, like, and people get judged all the time. It might not be for your body. It could be for something else. You're not athletic. So, when you see all these, pictures of people doing outlandish poses, which half the population will never ever do, nor should they, and you have the wrong idea. So I always recommend people go and just try it out a few times and find the right teacher. You were blessed. I was blessed that for my first class, I had an amazing teacher and an amazing experience that made me want more. And I never went back in the gym again. Just like, this is it for me. I wanted to pop in to thank you for listening to the Youthful Older Yogi. It's season 2, and I'm so excited to bring you more great guests, education, and ways for you to stay youthful in mind and body after 50. If you love the show and want to help me make it even better, please consider becoming a supporter.
You get to choose how much and how often you give, and there's no commitment. And remember, I donate a portion of every dollar I receive to charity. For 2024, I've chosen UNICEF. Just click the support button in the show notes. And just as helpful is sharing the show with other youthful older yogis. Thank you again so much for listening. And now let's get back to the podcast.
So you've been practicing for over 30 years, and you just within the last year became a teacher just now, which I applaud you. That's wonderful. And did you have any hesitation about becoming a teacher since you're leaning into your later years?
That's an interesting question because I retired early for what my plan, my vision of my life was going to be, because my new husband wanted to travel on a boat, and he's older than me, and so we decided to get out on this boat and go explore. It's very hard to do yoga on a boat, a sailboat, but I did. I did a lot of meditation on the boat, which helped because it's very isolating. And to kind of so there's only two of us on the boat, so there's not a lot of space to have conflict. So meditation really helped me in that conflict resolution. So when he got sick, I suddenly realized that I don't have my job is to take care of him, which okay, I'm absolutely comfortable doing. I didn't feel strong enough to take care of him, so I really leaned into yoga to have the strength to take care of him mentally and physically. And in that leaning in, my instructor, who I was doing all Zoom classes because she allowed me to jump in whenever I was available, which I loved the freedom that she gave me. If I had to jump off of the call because he needed me or I couldn't join right at the beginning, she allowed me to do that. We would get done with class and she would talk to me for a few minutes and she said, Sue, why don't you consider teaching, because it will not necessarily for you to go and teach, but for you to have a healthy practice on your own, to broaden your connection with the mind body, to understand things a little bit better. Maybe you can find some incremental modifications to help your body get even stronger. So her welcoming me and introducing me to that idea was just what I needed at just the right time. And then I met up with another teacher who instantly said, why aren't you teaching yoga? You have a voice that people want to hear. You have things that people want to hear. And so it was just the right timing for two people to say the same thing at pretty close connection. So my husband and I went to look at yoga studios in the area that we live in Florida. And we struck upon the perfect place for me. And it was just meant to be. So I signed up for it, but it was going to be in another 9 months. So I knew in my head that that was coming. So then I decided to go ahead and teach in my community so that I could see whether or not this was even something I could possibly do. Was I capable of doing it? So I started teaching before, kind of as guinea pigs, and they knew it, the people in my community. And they reinforced that I was on the right path for me. And so, I felt like it was the right thing to do at the right time. And I didn't feel at all like I was too old to do it.
I was going to ask you, were you the oldest in the class?
No,
Oh,
no,
great.
no.
Fantastic.
Yeah, the class that I attended, the training, and this is why it was so perfect, was for 55 and older. And it was like, okay, it was meant to be. That all of the peers, now there was one gal that was 50 in the class. And at the time that I took the training, I was 64. So, she was younger than everybody and even younger than what was advertised or expected, but she never felt like she did connect with the rest of us. And there were older people than me in the class.
That's so
It was, yeah, it was really interesting because when we spent our couple of days working on the asanas, the actual poses in yoga, And that's where I thought I was going to have a deficit, where I wasn't going to be able to do some of the things. I was willing to try everything: handstands, headstands, challenging poses. And there were many people in the class that wouldn't even try them. So I was always volunteering to do kind of the more leading edge ones. And I thought I was determined. I was determined to try. And I wasn't going to change as a person if I didn't try. So back to me being a change agent, I
Yeah.
felt like it was important.
That's amazing. And did you feel like an athletic side came out of you during that training that maybe
For
was
sure, for
maybe
sure. But I allowed my mind not to get to close me off from the option of even trying it. Like I was going to hurt myself or whatever. I mean, I do aerial yoga, and I did the aerial training, and I don't think I fully thought that through. I was the oldest person doing the aerial training. I was the oldest.
Mhm.
And there were times that I didn't, there were probably two things that I didn't do, and they were forward folding, forward rolls over, and I didn't feel comfortable doing those. But any of the backward ones, no problem. And I think there was just two things I didn't try.
Well, you are a living testament. This is what I'm trying to tell people. It's never too late to start anything, and what would you say to our listeners right now, whether they want to, probably, if they want to teach yoga, if you're over 50 or even 40, I mean, whenever, 60, 70, it's never too late to start anything new. What would you say to our listeners that are thinking about it, but not acting on it?
Well, overthinking anything becomes a resistance, a stop, um, a roadblock from actually doing. So put your feet, 2 feet in, and if you find that you don't love it, you're still going to learn something about the practice.
Mhm.
So the investment is really in you, not necessarily thinking about what are you going to do with it after you get done learning this new skill. But investing in yourself is never a bad thing to do. Um, and self care, I mean, we all talk about self care. People can go have massages, people can go have facials, and all different kinds of things. But really doing something physically that can and mentally to help your body, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I would encourage people just to try it.
Especially as we lean into our later years, it's scientific that if you keep trying new things, the word retirement should be banned, because I think years ago that meant, oh, I'm just going to sit in a lazy boy, you
Right.
know, and, not really participate in life anymore because I've been working so much. But I think it's shifted these days. You and I both teach at retirement communities for active older adults, and it's lovely. And we're both of an age, we're in our 60s. And it's like, I don't ever feel like I'm going to retire. If anything, I'm going to learn more and be more enriched than when I had to do some things or had
Right.
to do some work. And
Yes. Earlier today, my mom, who's 93, and I were having a conversation, and she said, I don't feel like I have any interest in learning anything new. And I was listening to her talk, and I thought, well, mom, you read the newspaper. She's old school. She's still reading a tactile newspaper, and you read it every single day. You spend hours reading that newspaper in the morning. Are you reading because you're curious, or are you reading just because you can check off the list? I read the newspaper today. And she's actually naturally curious about what's going on in the world, in sports, whatever the topics are that she's interested in reading about. And they're broad. And she reads books. She still does things. And I said, you are still learning, and you are still curious. And I think that the minute, I agree 100% with you, MJ, the minute you shut down the opportunity to be curious, instead of thinking about learning, you can look at it as I'm curious, I'm interested, and to be interesting to other people is also a nice thing to do as we age.
yes, I agree. And speaking about, uh, well, we didn't really speak about it. I just want to bring it up about your travel. So you traveled internationally with your job. You were in merchandising, you shared with me. And you got to travel internationally all over the world. And you made a point to stop and practice yoga in almost every city that you were employed in. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so, we always have a conversation before we tape this. And I asked her about what were some of the differences practicing, say, over in Europe or India or Asia. What um, what were the similarities and what were the differences? So could you expand on that for us?
Yeah, I think for me, because stress was such a factor, especially when I was traveling and being away from my what I know to be familiar, the yoga was something that was familiar. Plus, you can do it in your room by your, if you can't get down to a class in the hotel or in a adjacent studio, it was always an opportunity to continue a practice that helped you still be limber. You're sitting on planes for a long period of time, but when I would go to a studio or to a class, I, I just like in the United States, some teachers speak Sanskrit more than others, which is true when I traveled internationally, and it's true in the United States. Some people favor it, some people don't. Some do a combo meal. As far as the poses, none of the poses are any different. They might sequence them slightly different, but that happens in the United States. Teachers sequence. Sometimes they keep with the sun salutations, and that's all they teach. And others do creative combinations of sun salutations and leading into some peak poses and so forth. So, and it was very similar no matter where I went. The surprising thing was how many more men taught in these other countries and attended the classes. So a little bit more developed and less focused on more women. Because in the United States, unless it's Bikram or some of the more special regimented programs like Ashtanga, there was I think it leads a little bit more to women dominated in the United States, where I felt internationally I had more men in my classes.
Yeah, it's interesting. My 200-hour teacher was a man, and it was through Yoga Works, and it was the first time he had taught a teacher training of all women. And the first day he said, "Please don't anybody cry, because I don't know. They don't train me what to do if you cry." So, and of course, there was so much crying,
Yes.
and not in a bad way, just lots of opening. And also for listeners that don't know the history of yoga, it was taught by men to little boys, 1-to-1. So you had a mentor. Women weren't even allowed. So, and it's so kind of surprising that here in the Western world, it's women, mostly women, that go to class. But I'm finding now there's more men, retired men that are going because they feel the benefits, and whether their wives or their friends drag them there, they actually end up liking it. So if you're a man listening, just try it out. And yes, there'll probably be more women, but good for you. Right? So thank you for that. And so let's talk about your fashion merchandising and how you got into that. I'm just interested. I always want to know, like, what was the draw, or was it just something you fell into that you did? How did you get into that?
Well, I had wonderful grandparents, and one of my grandmothers that I dearly loved passed away at an early time, but she was a wonderful seamstress. She loved to put things together, clothing things, attire for my sister and I, because we were very close in age. We were actually 6 months apart because I'm adopted and my sister was not. And so she was just, I admired how well she looked, always, my grandmother looked, as well as what she did for my sister and I. And so I thought, well, that's interesting. And she wanted though she was a teacher and educator, she had always wanted to go into owning a store, and it would be a clothing store, and putting clothes together and so forth. So when I would dialogue with her, I was always curious about her interest in it. And then I felt like I wanted to be like her. And then when she passed, I thought that would be the greatest legacy, is to continue something that she chose not to do at the time. Because when she was growing up, she actually went to college. Um, being an educator was commonly what women did, either nursing or education, and that's what she felt kind of pigeonholed to do.
Mhm.
So I went to the same college where she had gone, and they had just begun a fashion merchandising program. So I was on the leading edge with that program at that school. And now they have a wonderful program, and I follow it. And I will leave a scholarship when I pass on at that school for future students in fashion merchandising, because I feel really strongly that I had a wonderful career. And I started at a department, and because retail was going through such an evolution in the definitely in the 90s, where it was consolidation happening, I found myself moving pretty rapidly around the country, because the retailers would go out of business that I was working with, or be consolidated. And but it gave me a wonderful opportunity to see the United States and live in different places, from the West Coast to the Midwest, down to Texas. And I worked for manufacturers, but mostly retailers. Um, and my last big job was at Michael's Arts and Crafts store, where I spent 15 years doing seasonal product, jewelry, um, frames. I did a gamut of product for them, as well as in leadership and senior management for them. And I really enjoyed that opportunity to develop product, so that people could have the opportunity to create with other family members, or for senior people to teach younger people how to knit and crochet, or whatever the craft is. And so I really enjoyed um, the kind of fellowship that crafting can create. And I tried really hard in my career to connect with things that weren't just making money, but also to create some kind of connection with other people. And that's what I feel like I've found in my mission in being a yoga teacher, is I really want to connect with senior people and try to increase the quality of their life and their mobility as they age. And the connection within the community of other yogis that they're in class with is really important to me. So it feels very similarly in my mind that I had a mission, and the product categories and the places that I worked and so forth.
Yeah, and I
So,
think from what you're telling me, you're doing exactly what you're putting things together like your grandmother did. See, she arranged things, and that's what you're doing. That's what we do in yoga. We arrange our bodies, we arrange our mind, we arrange our breath. We're combining. Yoga means to yoke. So I think your grandmother is smiling and looking down on you. That's such a great story. Thank you. We didn't talk about that before, so thank you for sharing that.
mhm.
And so Sue and I met, as I said, at an aqua yoga certification. It was a 2-day certification taught by Krista Fairbrother. And I'm curious to ask you what your experience was with the certification. We spent 2 days, 9 to 5, and then we were in the pool and we were in a classroom situation. And I think there was maybe 14 or 15 gals there from all over. And so, can you share what your experience was about the course and about maybe your future pool classes?
Yes. Again, trying to make sure that I open up the greatest amount of opportunities for people as they age. I felt like the water is a wonderful equalizer for those people, because I do teach a lot of chair yoga, and I teach mat yoga as well, gentle sculpt, a lot of different classes. But the water is such an opportunity for those people that have had a hip replacement or have shoulder issues, or their weight may stand in their way from being able to get up and down out of a chair or off the mat. Um, so I was excited to use the water as a vessel for increasing the opportunities for people to move. So I went to the class really not having high expectations, other than I was like a blank sheet of paper and I had no experience. I hadn't gone to an aqua yoga class before myself. And I thought, well, and I read all of the materials before we went. And I feel like I'm a better mat yoga teacher because of the aqua yoga class. And Krista indicated that we probably would be. And there were so many lessons in the materials that I felt like I could share. And then the sequencing, she provided some wonderful sequencing that we could purchase. And I went ahead and purchased those because I thought, I don't really know. I'm new to this.
Yeah.
I don't really know what things to put together and how to create a class. And talking to different people in the class, there were only a few people that really had already done some kind of aqua yoga teaching. And I agreed that just doing all aqua yoga for a class may be too much. I think some stretching is very important in the water first, and then maybe some moving and a bit of time spent moving in the water and getting the heart rate up, and then doing some aqua yoga and going into shavasana or final rest is a way I would really like to teach and feel comfortable teaching. But I started because I'm a snowbird. I was going to be away from the water a couple weeks after I took class, so I was a little intimidated. Was I going to remember everything I learned when I come back in the fall and I begin to teach? And so I took all of my sequences to the pool, and people started doing them all around me. I was just practicing in the water, and they were joining me. And I was like, okay, I did the right thing. Absolutely. And if I only teach in my community, I will be happy. But there's other, I already shared my certification with a few other communities that I teach, floor yoga with, and they are all very interested in it. So in me teaching as well. So I look forward in the fall to being able to teach, and I'm not intimidated now by teaching it.
It's really fun. I started 2 weeks ago. I was teaching aqua fitness through Silver Sneakers Plan pre-pandemic, and I taught at resorts. But this, like you said, I do. It's kind of like a hit yoga. So high intensity in the beginning, just 2 to 3 minutes of getting the heart rate up, and then we slow down, and then we do it again, and then we slow down, and it's so much fun. And it's literally, I took the sequences with me, and I just really pulled from what I really enjoyed at the certification, like teaching them how to do plank pose in the water, because it's laughable because I still can't do it very well because of the buoyancy. But I know you'll find so much joy in it. And that's what I love about teaching in the water versus land, is that nobody gets hurt. No, but everybody has fun. They want to be in the pool. And it's such a community thing because everyone's laughing. I also have them do partner stuff with the noodles. So
Oh, fun.
it's really fun. And it's my favorite class I look forward to now every week, is that pool class. So
Good.
I
Good.
can't wait for you to start teaching. It's great. All right, we're gonna wrap things up. But before we go, I have just a couple more questions. Um, I ask all my guests how they feel about aging, and have you noticed or experienced any drastic changes, not just physically, but any drastic changes, or are they kind of slow changes that you've noticed as you're ripening?
Yeah. Um, oh, for sure, you notice changes. Things ache when you get out of the car that didn't ache before. But I feel like if I hadn't been doing yoga, it would be worse. So I look at it as okay, there's these things, but it'd be worse if I wasn't as active as I am. But I will tell you, I hurt my sciatic earlier this year, and it took longer for me to recover. And so I do notice that when things, may cause me to slow down, they're for a reason. I needed to slow down. I was teaching too many classes in a day. I was pushing myself hard because I wanted to help more people. And I was so excited to help people that I overextended my own body, and I had to slow down. I still did teach, but I had to learn to teach a different way, which was good for me. So, even out of something that was maybe a negative thing, I turned it around and I was able to learn some new skills in teaching, as well as tell my mind we need to maybe we found our limit. We found, our perfect number of classes that we can teach in a day or a week.
Mhm.
But
Good. Yeah, it's of course things are going to change. Our bodies are, they do so much for us. And I also, I've was a professional dancer and I've been using my body for my entire life. So whenever I feel a little stiff in the morning or those aches come in, I just go, thank you, body. Thank you for still showing up for me.
mhm,
I'm going to show up for you like you've shown up for me. And I try to tell that to my students to just be amazed by the miracle that you're in because it's
mhm,
the bodies are miraculous and they want to heal, they want to be healthy. We just have to be the agent of change for them, just like you are.
mhm.
Yeah. So, what is your current favorite yoga pose?
Oh gosh. Oh, well, I think balance is so important in our life. So any kind of balance pose, whether it be even warrior two, you're balancing between your two legs, or going as far as any kind of a bind. I love to to do binds because it helps me to stretch my shoulders and my body. So I would say that combinations of doing that, which are balance and binding, are probably my favorite.
Awesome. I've not interviewed anyone who enjoys binding. You're the first. I love it. I love it. And then my last question to you, Sue, is usually the question is framed like knowing all you've learned and all you've experienced in your life, what would you tell your younger self? But I like to reframe that into knowing all that you know now and all the lovely experiences that you had. What do you want to tell your future self?
Don't stop learning. Don't stop being curious. Don't stop changing.
Awesome. Great words. Great. I appreciate you being here on the podcast. Um, where are you teaching? Are you up north now? Are you teaching up north?
I am teaching up north at a brand new studio in Wisconsin. I also teach Zoom classes with my community. So I taught this morning. So I teach twice a week on Zoom. And then when I get back in the fall, I'll be back in about three communities I teach that are all 55 and older communities, as well as one studio.
And
So
so in the links, can they find that all on your LinkedIn?
on
Uh,
my, not necessarily LinkedIn, but on my website that the best
I'll
view.
post. Mhm. Yeah,
Yes.
the best you. I love that title. So I will have all the links of where to find Sue. If you're in Wisconsin, you've got a gift right there. Whereabouts in Wisconsin are you?
It's actually in Racine, Wisconsin, which is right on the shores of Lake Michigan.
Oh, nice. And then you'll be coming back to Florida in the fall?
September.
Great. All right. Well, maybe we can hook up and have some time together in person. I would love that. So again, thank you so much, Sue. And I really appreciate you being on the podcast. And I've really enjoyed meeting you and learning about your wonderful, interesting life.
Thank you for asking me to do this.
You're welcome. Take care.
All right. Bye bye.
Thanks so much for listening. For more youthful and healthy information, subscribe on my website, shareyogawithmj.offeringtree.com, and receive my monthly newsletters. Or if you know how to navigate social media, find me on Facebook /Mary Jane Waddell. That's Jane with a Y, Jayne, and Instagram at Mary Jane Waddell. Remember, Jane with a Y. This podcast would not be possible without the help of my editor, Dan Jones from Cocoa Beach Productions. You can find Dan at cocoabeachweb.com. And of course, thanks to my generous guests who share their time and youthful wisdom. Remember, the Youthful Older Yogi podcast is presented solely for educational, inspirational, and entertainment purposes. It is not intended as a substitute for a physician or other qualified professionals. Okay, yogis, stay well, stay youthful, and keep sharing yoga.